Welcome back. Good to see everyone grabs a hot beverage and something to snack on. This is our fourth and final session. It's that point of the day where we do need a bit of a pepper. We've been able to stand up and have a bit of a walk around. I like to just, and this is quite indulgent because I just enjoy this particular exercise. I was wondering if you could join with me in a short exercise. It's a bit of a repeat after me thing and it makes a bit of noise. Has anyone heard of or seen of lights, camera, action before? No, just it's so what you'll need is space in front of you on the table, or if you're not comfortable with the table, what's on the table, maybe it's a little drink. Maybe pull your seat out a little way and have your lap available to yourself. So you need your hands. This particular exercise and the table and your lap. It's very simple. Very simple. So there's three stages to this particular exercise: lights, camera, action. And so when I give you lights, I just want you to repeat it after me. So lights. Good. This is always how this exercise starts. We'll practice a few times, and this is the beauty of the exercise. It starts terribly, but as you'll see, it finishes really good. Regardless of the audience, right? So let's practice that again. Lights. One more time. Action. Action. Sorry. It's lights, camera, action. Today's camera. Okay, let's start again. And we'll start with the lights. Okay. Lights. Camera. Action. Let's go through it again. Lights one more time. We'll just do lights. Lights. Camera. Action. I want us to, if we can, try and use the table because there's not enough noise with the laps. Is that okay? We just try the table so we can move the table. Right. Right, let's do it. Lights. Camera. Action. That'll do us. That's good. All right. Thank you very much. It shows you what a group of people can do in a short period of time. I enjoy that. Thank you for indulging me. So it's been a great day. We've heard some amazing speakers, but I can tell you that the quality of the speakers does not diminish as the day goes on. The fourth session of the conference is about the changing legal and compliance landscape in horticulture. There are perhaps a few questions that have been raised through the day that we might have answered for ourselves through this session. So really looking forward to it. Our first speaker is the founder and director of Sustainable Assurance Solutions Proprietary Limited, Arta Bekzadar. A trusted and well-respected figure in the social compliance world, Arta will be presenting about social compliance auditing and some common misconceptions people have about audits. How very timely. Please join with me in welcoming Arta to the stage.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm so glad that you show up after a second break. I wasn't sure you're coming back. Okay, and thanks for Richard for having this practice because I'm sure that you woke up just in case and listened to this exciting presentation. Okay, so what do we have? As Richard mentioned, I would like to share with you in terms of what is audit, social compliance or ethical sourcing audit is, and also some misconception which is basically we need to cover and talk about that today. Before that, I would like to thank you all for coming to this conference. I know that it's very hard to make time, but this proves that you people who you are in this room care about community, care about your business, and care about compliance. And also, I would like to thank you to amazing Fair Farms teams for organizing such an amazing and fantastic event for us today. Okay, so I would like to share some information about Sustainable Assurance Solution. What is this company? I'm not sure if you heard about our business. We are a local Australian business with an expertise in social compliance and ethical sourcing. And it was interesting that I heard some of you made some comments in terms of there are some challenges. We are well aware of some of the issues in terms of auditors' qualification or auditors' performance. Also, we are aware of, there are some challenges within suppliers that how they manage this ethical sourcing audit. So the reason this company established, focus is ethical sourcing, social compliance, when we are here to support suppliers in Australia to make sure that if there is any improvement, if there is anything they can improve or basically helping to grow their business in terms of compliance, we're just here to help them. So just remember, I heard that some of I think one of the auditors, they mentioned that there is not any qualification in terms of auditors, and this is basically, I can share with you, and I'm sure that Joe is here to cover some of the information in terms of auditors' qualification as well. So let's just start with what I wanted to share today as part of today's session in terms of learning outcome of today's session. We want to make sure that we are clear about what audit is and why you guys need to have this audit. We heard a lot about other speakers, and I think this is basically made it easy for my speech because we talk a lot in terms of there are some risks. There are some basically in terms of your brand reputation and some of the things which is covered by other speakers. This made it easy for me because now I don't need to tell you that you need to have what we still need to talk about what are the benefits, and I would like to share the benefits and bad impact or good impact of your business through this audit process. The other thing that we need to basically you need to understand is there are some benefits of social compliance. There is a misconception in terms of audit, which is basically we try and working hard with major retailers here, we're working with suppliers, we're working with other audit firms because they're just thinking this is just something which is push suppliers in order to bear an extra cost, and they don't get any benefits, or this is audit basically doesn't add any value to their business. So I'm here to tell you that hopefully after this session and after I go through presentation, we all agree that what are the benefits and how you need to manage your social compliance audit. Also, there are some common issue in Australia, which is basically the good news is, which I need to share today, is we have a great system in place in terms of we recording and we capture all of the non-compliance, which is coming from the audit, number of audits that we've done here in Australia. And we have a system in order to share with you guys that what are these common issues and helping you to understand that these are common and you need basically take an action and making sure you comply here. And there is no problem in terms of the common issues. Okay. So before I just start to give you this information, I would like to start to asking you a question that what do you think? We talk about a lot that you need to have an audit, and audit several times. We heard that we said audit, but I would like to ask you, what do you think that when we say audit, what is the exactly definition of audit? Who wants to answer? We say lots of time, yeah, you have to have an audit, and it's not just for social compliance. We basically, you have so many different audit programs, but this is actually important because before we get there to understand that why you guys need to have this audit, we want to understand that, do you understand what exactly this audit means?
Checking compliance to standard.
Yeah? Yep. And what is exactly the activity of audit? What exactly is basically we means that when we come into your site and we're saying that you need to have an audit. Any other answer?
Legislation into a reality
Yep.
and never reality in the workplace.
Yep.
And auditing checks and maps against that.
Yep. Yep. Any other answer? That when we say audit, because this is important. For me, when I have a presentation, I wanted to understand that first we all need to agree that what is the definition when we talk about audit, because otherwise it's just not easy to explain then why do you need to have this audit. Let's have a look. So what is an audit? So this is basically a formal examination of workplace, which when we say workplace, this means that this is your site or your facility or practice. This audit aims to check your current practices against a defined standard, which is here, if you do, for example, Fair Farms audit, there is a standard and you need to basically check your current practices against this standard. And this could be such as code of practice or a technical aspect, also local laws as well. So this is basically, in order to conduct the audit, then the auditor is using corroborated evidence to check to make sure that you comply or you need to improve. All right? So now we all agree that what is an audit and why exactly, what is happening through the audit process. But just in order to, before I just take you through the next question, which is why do you need to have an audit, I would like to share with you that how the social compliance or ethical sourcing audit basically, what is the practice? How does it done at your facility? So there are some techniques, which is, I know that for some auditors who are doing management system audit or food safety, is a bit different. This type of audit program is a bit different, and the reason is that the most sensitive area for this audit are people. They are the one who are working at your site as a labor, as a workers, as employees, and this is the most sensitive basically part of this audit. So in order to complete this audit, for some of you that you are not familiar with the social compliance audit, it's called triangulation technique. And auditors needs to have a skill in terms of covering this triangulation technique, which is covering the coming on site. Some of you have already done, you are familiar with the audit process, but they come into your site, they have a look to your site around, and the next triangulation is basically they try to see if there is anything during site visit observation. And then the next is basically interview with your employees. So that's a part which is very sensitive, and auditors need to have a skill in terms of communicating and get a feedback from your employees. The other one which needs to cover during the audit process is have a look to documentation, which is your policy procedure, which is your, depends on, for example, if you're using labor hire, for example, then a labor hire agency information, and also covering health and safety section, which is have a look to your, for example, health and safety risk assessment, and some of the records, which is making sure you comply with health and safety as well. And also, as part of this, we always say that management interview is basically from the first point that auditors come into your site till the closing meeting. That's part of the audit process. So this is basically very simple. The only difference that we can say that is different from other audit programs is mainly interview with your employees. Okay, now we understand that what is the audit process and this triangulation. Before I just continue for this slide, I would like to share with you that I heard some of the comments you guys made in terms of auditor using their interpretation, or it shouldn't be such a this at all. So there is a standard and there is a local laws. So there is not interpretation. For example, if auditor says that you are not comply with some certain things, then you need to ask, where is the standard? What is this coming from? And you have the right to ask a question from your auditor. So it's nothing that if I go to the site, I just come in and put my judgment to say, oh, you need to have, for example, first aid there, or you need to have this, without supporting that what is it coming from. There are some code of practices as well, depends on different states. For example, it's make it clear that in terms of workplace health and safety, that this is a slightly different. But mainly, there are the certain requirement, minimum requirement that they need to comply, you need to comply, all right? So I don't agree that this says that auditors, this is coming from auditors making decision or auditors' judgment. I don't think that's a right way to say. But to be honest, I need to say to you, some of the comments you made are fair in terms of there are some inconsistency in terms of how auditors doing the audit, or that's, to be honest, we all aware of that, and we're working together to make sure that basically we improve the quality of audit in Australia as well. To give you some idea, an idea about auditing process and auditor's qualification, I'll leave this to next speaker that she will share with you, but quickly just let you know that APSCO organization is in charge of social compliance, ethical sourcing qualification, and also I myself, I'm trainer in Australia in terms of my training session are all recognized by APSCO organization, and I'm in charge of training auditors as part of this audit process, which is called CSR auditors training, and I had a chance to have some training in the last 2 years, and we can see we're working hard together, and we can see that the auditors basically performance is improved in the last 2 years as well, and we're working harder as well to make sure that we minimize the gap. And then you don't see that one auditor is coming to say, hey, this is the list of compliance, the other auditor is coming with something different. It should be consistent, and we need to have a calibration session within auditors industry in Australia as well. Okay, so let's have a look to what's the benefits of social compliance audit. This is very obvious, and I'm sure that you all know that basically visibility of operation or your current social compliance practices at your site. Just remember, if you, the speaker, Steve, just talking about, there is not transparency or not visibility in terms of specifically for horticulture industry in terms of reporting, and be clear that what are the current practices, which basically this audit, after you go through this audit process, generating and developing the report can help you in order to be more transparent and visible in terms of what's happening at your company. The other one, which is basically identifying the potential risk and eliminating the risk. So just remember, I'm sure we heard a lot today, the risk, and reputation. So this is basically the first step in order to eliminate or mitigate the risk is you need to be aware, you need to identify, and it's not happening if you don't have any monitoring system and if you don't go through the audit process. Right? So this is basically the first step, and after you identify, then I'm sure that I don't think there is anyone in the room to say that I know that there is some non-compliance and I don't want to take any actions. So then this gives you opportunity to improve the current practices. So that's important. And also, we talk, some other speaker, they already said so many times, I heard reputation, and that's true. This is one of the biggest benefit that you can get from having visible and transparent system is brand reputation. Also, I'm happy that we had the Naomi, she already mentioned in terms of people are the most powerful, innovative asset in your business, and that's absolutely true. Because we need to increasing staff motivation. And this is impact on your staff to be more encouraged to work for more ethical business. And the last one, again, being transparent with your buyers and also other third parties as well. So these are all benefits that can help you that after having a high quality audit, you can get. Okay, now, let's see what are the risks. We can just say, okay, this is a benefit, but I wanted to share with you that what are the risks of poor practices. Because sometimes we all know that, okay, that's the benefits, but let's be more clear. Let's go to the next step and just say, what are the risks if you have a poor practices? This is actually 3 examples. It's not covering all, but for example, if you have a contract, then you have a shorter contract with buyers, and sometimes less leverage to negotiate on price. So that's the thing, because especially now, we all know that world is changed, and everyone wants to work with companies who are more transparent and ethical. So the other one basically is access to markets, which is products can be blocked from markets. And just back to what Steve said, they are coming, we know that they're just coming and visit you at some stage. And before, you will be in trouble in terms of getting a notice or notice of non-compliance or notice of, and makes your business in trouble, then it's better to making sure that you take an action, you go through this monitoring system, and you basically protect your business, which is basically then its impact on your poor reputation as well. Because as soon as you get a fine, as soon as you just, your business name is listed in the non-compliance or you get a notice, then this is basically a stay forever in your company's history. The other one that if you have a poor practice is sometimes it doesn't see, but I can share with you that this is an extra cost, which is basically including high staff turnover and low morale among the staff. That is true. Maybe just you don't see it's a hidden cost, or you don't basically just maybe pay attention, but I'm here to share with you that this is a cost that you have to pay if you don't care about what's happening, what's your current practices. Also, it could be possible if there's something, fines or remediation costs or higher cost of capital. That is all basically could impact your business. I would like to share some of the experience that we had, because sometimes I believe that some business, they don't want to just, they don't have any intent in order to be not comply. But, and we all know that labor hire is the most common, issues that basically they make trouble for in terms of how they're managing the staff or underpayment issue for workers. I went to visit one of the, it was actually in SA, I think, here, South Australia, and I had a chat with some of the employees. They were all migrant, vulnerable, you will remember, vulnerable employees, and I had a chat and I said, okay, how much you get? And I found out the company using the labor hire, they didn't have any idea. They showed me the proof that they pay $35 per hour, so all of the document was fine. But when I had a chat with employees, I found they get $5, and it's not more than a year ago, $5 per hour. And there was no documentation. The only thing they trusted me, and they showed me on their phone that how much they transferred to their account, and it came up that they get $5 per hour. And because the year, and I never forget what she said to me, she looked at me and she said, I was fainted last week because I cannot survive. I have to work 80, 100, depends how many hours a week in order to be survived. So the question is that the business owner didn't have any idea, and the impact was, basically massive. And as soon as I had a chat, and because there wasn't any paperwork, the business owner said, we didn't know, we just leave it to this. And sometimes I had actually the answer that I just heard from many business owners. They just think, this is not our responsibility. This is another company, it's nothing to do with us. I can tell you that's not true. If anything happened at your side, that is back to you, and it's your responsibility. Please pay attention, because it's basically things change. And I remember that when we had ethical sourcing audit in past, I started in Australia ethical sourcing audit program since 2011. And I remember at that time, we just exclude. Pay attention, they exclude, in the program, they exclude any high labor or any labor hire or something like that, contract, it wasn't part of the audit. Few years after that, they just say no. Basically, responsibility is back to the owner, and we have to cover that. They added as additional elements, and they just put it that this is actually back to the business owner, back to the director of the company, and they have to cover labor hire and employees as well. So any type of ethical sourcing now you do at your facility, labor hire is a big part, and we all know that most challenging part as well. So these are, I have so many examples, but I know that I need to stick with time, so it's better to just move on. Now look at the benefits that you get from having the good practices. So happier workforce who are committed to their job. You talk about, shortage of employees. I believe that if you find some good employees that they like to work at your facility, is make it less, I'm not saying it's zero, but at least it can make less challenges for your facility. And I don't think anyone disagree with me, because people love to work with, if there is any moral or ethical, or you treating them well, so they stay and they love to work with you. Even coming back next year, if you have a seasonal, they just contact. Especially, I heard that some comments from backpackers, they just coming and say, we have some good memories from some, for example, farmers, and we love to come back and work. So obviously, this is coming from the benefits of good practices. The other one is lower staff turnover, lower absenteeism. This is actually interesting because we talk about lower absenteeism and people just say, why is it just related? And I can say to you that we basically experienced some of the sites that we audited, and we found out is basically they had some incident. The incident was high, and they have to basically cover some, people have to take sick leave, people got sick. So that's basically impacted on people, basically lower absenteeism as well. I need to rush it a bit. Okay, and potential for a stronger and longer trading relationship, which is obvious. Supportive local communities, better reputation, we already discussed, and better security in your business, making you more attractive to investing. So these are the, I think that we cover almost everything that is as a good practice. And also this is some examples that, this is basically globally, because I've just, I'm in charge and working with a global team, but there are some examples that sometimes these are the things that happen in the future, in the past, which is some of the, and you can see here, for example, Nestle was in trouble in terms of the, labor, slave labor is on Brazil, and, these are the things that happen globally, and it was on media, and that's kind of impact on the company's reputation. What are the major challenges? We all are aware that there are some challenges. It's covered by Rachel, it's covered by some other speakers, and we know that you have something, but there are some other that I thought that in terms of, in our perspective, in terms of as an audit firm, we know that there are some challenges in terms of lack of education. There are some confusion in terms of modern slavery. Horticulture is complex. Sometimes it's not because you don't want to comply. We know that it's some of the rules that may be oversight or misinterpret and makes you ended up with some non-compliance. And also shortage of labor, which we discuss a lot, and local, there is another issue which is in terms of audit cost, and also shortage of local APSCA auditor. We know that we don't have much qualified auditor, but we're hoping that we're working together and we have more qualified and experienced and basically high quality auditors in Australia. The other one is seasonal audit program. That's another challenge. We all know that. And in the last part, I would like to share this section, which I think maybe it's is interesting. As I said, we record the issues in our system, and as you see here, this is for just for 8 months. And this actually chart is updated today, so I didn't access to that. But you can see 2,420 non-compliance we recorded in our system in 8 months. And there are some good example, 448, and some observation. So just remember, the other things that is good through this, when you basically take action and go through this audit process is, some of the companies, they just don't want to be compliant. They want to go beyond compliance. And that's a good thing that now they're competing in terms of who is doing better. So that's, and I believe this is a future. So we are not just a stick with compliance. We want it to be always better and making sure that we have a good reputation in the community. In terms of what are the issues, because I thought it's good to let you know, the most majority of issues that it raised is health and safety, health and safety is the major issues, and it's mainly because of it's coming the next slide, what is covered as part of what are the issues under health and safety. And also the second one is the wages. And that is exactly prove what Steve said in terms of the inspection they've done, and they found there are so many issues in terms of wages, and which is lack of access, which is coming. Let me just here, okay. Yeah, and you can see payment of wages is the highest number in terms of underpayment issue we found. And here, which is interesting, you can see this is basically labor hire issue. So these are the number which is basically proof that there are some issues. So, and this is, I believe that the first step that we wanted to do, if we wanted to take action, is be aware of, we accept that there are some existing issues in order to take an action. In terms of health and safety, the first one is first aid, accidents, lack of document or is not recorded. That's the highest number that it captured. And the second one, which is very surprising me, is in terms of fire safety. Fire safety, and fire safety, you see electrical or fire safety, fire exit door. So most of them is back to the fire safety, which is very interesting. We all know that we living in Australia and needs to take more attention to this area. Okay, and thank you all again. I know that just past the time. I would like to say that let's work together. Let's work together for a better and sustainable future for next generation, and let's work together to have a better life for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Ada, for those valuable insights into what it takes to be a successful social compliance auditor. And as you say, an excellent sort of introduction to our next speaker. Edmund Burke of Holding Redlich Lawyers. Edmund is presenting on workplace health and safety and rural industry, including prosecutions, pitfalls and planning. Also, tips on how to protect your business, your wallet and your workers and comply with your growing WHS obligations. Please join with me in welcoming Edmund to the stage.
Thank you. That probably makes it sound a bit more comprehensive than it is in terms of this presentation, but I'll run through it quickly, and I think if anybody wants the slides afterwards, just ask me for them. Now, I should say at the outset, I was quite excited when I found out I was speaking at this event, because probably about 35 years ago, my father worked in farm safety in Northern Ireland, and back then, he had to do presentations, not quite like this, but he had to get photographs of typical accidents around the farm, and I was his model. So, so somewhere there's photographs of me lying under a gate and lurking around a slurry tank and things like that. Unfortunately, I couldn't get them for this presentation, but if you can just have that in your mind, that'd be good. Now, this is off SafeWorks site, and basically what they're pointing out here is that farms, rural industries are probably one of the most dangerous industries in the country in terms of the types of things that can happen. And you can see some of the areas there: plant, tractors, quad bikes, ask Ozzy Osbourne, chemicals, noise, dust, working at heights, basically the whole gamut, because there is such a variety of tasks on most farms. And you'll see there, these are the most recent statistics on worker deaths in Australia. And you'll see agriculture, forestry and fishing is 23 so far. Oh, sorry, 26 so far this year. That's 26 deaths in the industry across Australia, and that's from a total of 110 or 120 for the following year. So it gives you an idea of, it's a very, very high proportion of the worker deaths in the country that are in your industry. And again, that's probably because, as I just said, there are such a variety of tasks, so many hazards, it's very, very difficult to protect your employees against those types of hazards. But what I want to talk to you about today is the fact that There is a legislative regime in place now. It's really gathering steam, and certainly in Queensland, where I practice, I've seen a large part of my practice now being taken over defending work health safety prosecutions. Again, that's just off another Safer Farms report to give you an idea of how many Australians or how many people have died in farms in the last 10, 20 years. So really, the reality is it's a big issue, and it's an issue that's getting a lot of attention in terms of the academic studies, the studies that WorkSafe do, because as I say, probably about, I think it was around 10, just over 10 years ago, we had the model laws come into force or be drafted. And what happens is the states then pick those up, and progressively they've been introduced across Australia. I think pretty much all the states and territories now have a similar act. Victoria is still lagging behind a bit, but they have taken some elements of the model laws. And these are just some of the court reports from the Office of Work Health and Safety Prosecutor in Queensland. And that was a body that was set up when they brought in industrial manslaughter in Queensland. They basically set up an Office of Prosecutors just to prosecute work health safety matters. And a prosecution under the Work Health Safety Act is actually a criminal prosecution. And under the Act, as I'll go into in a little bit more detail soon, you can really find yourself literally in jail if you haven't done enough to try and comply with this legislation. It really is that serious. You can find yourself in jail, or you could alternatively find yourself in financial ruin because the fines and penalties are very, very high. Now, some of those examples, these are literally the top 3 on that website at the moment, each of them involving a farm or rural industry. There's one where a backpacker died of heat exposure. Another anecdote, actually, when I first came over here, I picked bananas in Innisfail, and it was minus 11 degrees Celsius when I left Belfast. And within a week, I was picking bananas in 42 degree in Innisfail. And I thought, what the hell have I done? But it is, heat stress, it might be something that you would think of, but it does kill people. And you do have an obligation to look after the people that are working for you. You've got one there, electrical safety duty. And I'm sorry, the text is quite small, but you can see the levels of fines that individuals and companies are getting. And I'll just go have a closer look at that soon. So there's 3 main categories of offence, the higher offences under the Act. Category 1 is without reasonable excuse if the person engages in conduct that exposes an individual to whom a duty is owed a risk of death or serious illness, injury or illness, and the person is reckless as to that risk. Maximum penalty there, and these are pretty much standard across the country. For an individual, $300,000 or 5 years imprisonment. For an individual, what's under the Act called a PCBU, which is basically the company, the employer, you're looking at $600,000, or sorry, $3 million for the company, $600,000 for an officer, which is basically, if you think of that as a manager or somebody quite senior within your organization. 5 years imprisonment for the officer, $3 million. Now, I don't know how many businesses can just wear a $3 million fine. The vast majority, unless they're a really, really massive organization, that will be the end of the business if they find themselves in that position. Category 2 offence, which is the one that we see most often, is if the person fails to comply with the general duty and the failure exposes an individual to a risk of death or serious injury or illness. So that's without the element of recklessness, which is what brings it up to the Category 1. But for the Category 2, you're still looking for a body corporate around $1.5 million maximum fine. For an individual, $150,000. There's no imprisonment for that category, but again, the fines are very, very hefty. And then Category 3 is basically all of the other contraventions under the Act. Maximum penalty for an individual is $50,000, and for the company itself is $500,000. So those are big fines, and certainly in Queensland, we are seeing them prosecute everything. They've got the resources to do it. It's quite a political thing. It's seen as a successful piece of legislation in Queensland, and it's being successfully enforced. Now, a few years back, you might remember the accident at Dreamworld. Shortly after that, we saw industrial manslaughter come into the statute books. It had already been in the ACT, but nobody had ever been prosecuted under it. And I can remember at the time when this change came into the legislation saying, at a presentation just like this, you know, I think it's fairly unlikely that we're going to see people actually be prosecuted for industrial manslaughter. And, you know, I'm not ashamed to say that I was wrong. We have seen people prosecuted and we have seen people convicted for industrial manslaughter now in Queensland over the last couple of years. And industrial manslaughter hasn't come in across the country yet, but I will make another prediction, hopefully more accurate than the last one, that I think it certainly will be in the statute books, probably across the entire country within 5 or 10 years. And again, that's really just, we all know what manslaughter is. It's manslaughter in a workplace context. And the reality of what it means is it's a lot easier to track the offence back to senior executives within the company who can then be personally prosecuted for industrial manslaughter and find themselves facing a jail term. So this is serious stuff. To a certain extent, businesses getting to grips with it have been left to their own devices. And I think you could probably say even more so for more rural industries, because certainly, again, I keep referring back to Queensland, but that's the area I know very well. What we saw initially was a great deal of activity in the big urban centres, but not so much happening elsewhere. But we are now seeing, even from those examples I showed you, they're branching out, they are enforcing it right across the state. I can't see any reason why that wouldn't continue in that way. That's just an example I've put in there. That's from South Australia. It involved an elevated work platform, which are used quite regularly on most farms. And up until now, there hasn't been a lot of regulation around them. We just had a coroner's inquest in Queensland into a photographer who died when one of those things collapsed on him. And the coroner recommended further regulation, and I expect that we will see that. But have a look at those fines and what happened to the company. So this was a sole trader. It's basically just a guy in a machine that contracts out. He was convicted, and the penalty would have been a fine of $250,000 on the first defendant and a fine of $40,000 imposed on the second defendant. The reason why I say would have been was the first defendant ended up in liquidation, the second defendant was bankrupt as a result of trying to defend these charges and as a result of the penalties that were imposed. So again, for smaller businesses, this can be absolutely the end of your business financially. For the larger businesses, it's still a lot of money. And certainly something that you would want to avoid if you possibly can, not just because it involves people's health and safety and life, but also because it involves money, which nobody wants to throw away needlessly. Now, I have kept this very basic, and I apologize for people who know all of this already, but basically within these acts, there's 3 main duty holders. So what they call the PCBU, which is the person conducting the business or undertaking. So that can be, like I said, an individual. It can be a company, a partnership, any type of employer. An officer then has extra duties under the Act. And an officer can be sort of loosely defined as a manager or somebody that has some authority and control over the finances of the business, who has authority and control over the workers. And then the worker, he has a duty like anyone else under the Act, and I'll just go into those duties now. So primary care of duty, basically the Act requires all PCBUs to ensure, as far as is reasonably practicable, and that's an important term, the health and safety of the workers engaged or caused to be engaged by the person, workers whose activities in carrying out the work are influenced or directed by the person, while the workers are in work in the business or undertaking. So if I can summarize that, basically as a PCBU, you are responsible for the health and safety of everyone. Now that's not just your own employees or not just family members that work for you. It's also contractors that you have coming in, might be just coming in for a day's work to do a simple task. You do have work health safety responsibilities towards a contractor, even though they're self-employed, even though they may be using their own equipment, even though you may have very little contact with them throughout the day, you still have duties to ensure their safety as far as is reasonably practicable. The duty of officers, the key term there is the officers must exercise due diligence. So that really just raises it up a bit more than the standard duty of care. They must act on risks, hazards, things that they see in the workplace. They can't just ignore it, or they can't just look after themselves. And then the duty of workers, they've got to take reasonable care for their own health and safety and that of others who might be infected by their acts or omissions. They have to comply with the law as far as they're reasonably able, and they have to cooperate with any procedures or policies that the PCBU wants to put in place in relation to health and safety. Now, this diagram was lifted from WorkSafe. I can never quite figure out what it means, so I put 2 in just to be sure. But basically what it's talking about is the really basic process of risk assessment, which every business should be doing. And that's really a common sense process. You've got to identify hazards. You've got to assess the risks. How dangerous is the hazard that you've identified? Then you've got to do whatever is reasonably practicable to control the risk or eliminate it if possible. And then you have to review and record regularly to make sure that everything is working as it should be, that the risk has been either eliminated or controlled, and it has to be an ongoing process. It's not something you just do once a year. It has to be ongoing. So reasonably practicable. It's hard to say, and it's throughout the Act. It really is, for me, it's the core principle in the Act. You have to do what is reasonably practicable. And then you might ask yourself, well, what's reasonably practicable? And these are the types of factors that you must weigh up. So the likelihood of the hazard or the risk occurring. So, if it's something that could happen, but, it's extremely unlikely, maybe you have a volcano on your property, it goes off every couple of 100 years, you're not going to be asked to sort of top it off with concrete or anything like that. That's a different thing. But certainly if you have a piece of plant, a piece of machinery that if it's not properly maintained might explode, well, that's a pretty immediate hazard that really you should do something to avoid. And that's going to be reasonably practicable, either to buy a new piece of plant or get somebody in to fix it and have it regularly maintained. The next thing that they have there is what the person concerned knows or ought to reasonably know about the hazard or risk and ways of eliminating it or minimizing it, availability of suitable ways to eliminate or minimize the hazard or risk. And you'll notice the very, very last thing that is considered is the cost, and that's deliberate. The cost can't be the primary reason for deciding what is reasonably practicable. So if we go back to the example of the exploding piece of machinery, it might be a very expensive piece of machinery, but that's not going to be enough if you say it wasn't reasonably practicable for me to do anything about it because it's so expensive. Or it's so expensive to maintain. That's not going to be a sufficient reason to convince the judge that you've done what was reasonably practicable in those circumstances. So it is a consideration, but it's the last consideration. Now, in terms of basic things that every farm should do, every business should do, records are really, really important under this regime, because what the records show is that you are doing what you can to comply with the legislation. So if, for example, you have a particular task that you might want to have a safe work method statement for, if you have new employees coming in regularly, a transient workforce, maybe a formal induction and a record of them having done the induction, all of those sorts of things will stand you in good stead if you are unlucky enough to be prosecuted. Training register, injury register and notification. And like I said, I can't really go into the detail in the time that I have, but hopefully you all know if there is a work health accident, incident on the farm, you really, really have a pretty immediate obligation to notify the relevant state WorkSafe or body that looks after work health safety in your state. And you should have a system in place to do that, because that in itself is an offence if you don't do it. And again, this is just something I've pulled out because it is a really important thing for most businesses to have, especially farms, because some of them might be remote, some of them might have difficulty getting somebody medical help if they need it, and you want to have a plan in place to deal with an emergency if and when it happens. And you want to have a document that shows that you have that plan. If something does happen, and if you find yourself being prosecuted, those types of documents will be your friend, because it at least shows that you have made the effort to comply with the legislation. And I've just put some useful links there at the end. Safe Work Australia is kind of the overarching body for all of the states. They came up with the model laws that the states have adopted, and they've got some really good products and tools on there to help you with the basics. If I've given you a big fright and you want to figure out how to deal with all of this, there's some great information on there. Each of the states have their own websites, and also, and I haven't really spoken about it, how am I doing for time? A couple of minutes. Codes of practice. So in Queensland, and again, in each different regime, they have a different sort of status, but in Queensland, the code of practice is actually the base standard for any particular task. So if Work Health Safety has produced a code of practice for any particular task, they'll be on these websites, and you really should have a look before you go ahead and do it. For things like even overhead power lines, how far the exclusion zone needs to be, the types of spotters that you need to have for particular tasks. And again, 99% of the time, none of this is going to be a problem, but it's that 1% of times when it is a problem. It's always terrible if somebody hurts themselves. It's even worse if somebody dies. But, it can be the difference between having a business and not having a business if you aren't aware of this stuff and if you haven't taken steps to try and comply with the legislation. Having said all of that, hopefully you have a capability study from our capability statement from Holding Redlich in your little packs or at some stage. If you do need any help with anything, give us a call. Myself in Brisbane and my colleague Mike Salinger in Sydney have a particular interest in this area, and we're always keen to help people out if they give us a call. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Edmund, for those WHS insights. Now, for our next speaker in this session, we have Neil Salvador. Neil has extensive experience in senior management roles in large public organisations, such as Toll Holdings and Asiano Proprietary Limited. Admitted to practice law, Neil has managed complex employment and safety matters throughout Australia for many years. This knowledge and experience was recognised through teaching awards at RMIT, where Neil currently lectures regularly in employment and safety law. Assisting Volitia Farms in establishing strong compliance processes, Neil joined forces with Catherine to form Volitia Education Group, which I'm very interested in learning more about. Please welcome Neil to the stage.
Thank you. That was a great introduction. Thank you. Well, thank you everyone. Well, firstly, I have to say I'd like to thank Growcom, Fair Farms, Rachel, Sachin, and also Judy for the wonderful opportunity today. It really is a terrific opportunity with so many great speakers today. I'm quite humbled. So, why me? What do I have? What's my relevance with regards to horticulture? Hopefully I can shine some light on that for all of you today. I have to say, what I want to go through is my background, the state of the nation, a legal perspective on horticulture, to extend on some of the matters that Edmund has brought up, and also my perspective. Now, in this first slide, my background, I have to say this. I have seen some really great photos and pictures of people's family today, and I asked my mum to send me some photos, which she did. She really did. I have those on my camera, and I have to say there is no way that I was going to put those up. I have a little bit of pride, so I do have those on my phone. We've heard today about some stories with regards to migration and people coming to Australia. My parents were from Sri Lanka, came to Australia in about 1972. I was a baby at that stage. When they came to Australia, both of them had tertiary qualifications that weren't recognised in Australia at all. So both of them ended up working in a large organisation. In fact, it was Philips that is no more operating here in Australia. But my dad drove a forklift for about 20, 30 years, and my mum worked in a manufacturing plant at Philips as well. Now, their story about their workplace is quite positive. But as I grew up and I heard about some of the stories and some of the things that they were asked to do, I often wondered about really where that fits in. Was it appropriate to ask them to do some of the things that they had to do? And they simply didn't know any better. Both of them quite subservient, both of them concerned about making sure that they had ongoing jobs for not only themselves, but my two sisters and I. So with that, they continued and they did what they had to. But it did bring me to a number of questions as I continued to grow up. And again, we've heard these stories, certainly from Catherine. You were told coming to Australia, what you had to do was either work hard or really study hard. And in fact, that was instilled to me at a fairly young age. And I've been fortunate enough through my life to have a few qualifications, two of which resonate very strongly with me. One is my law degree and the second is my teaching degree. And education for me, as I've continued through various different roles, senior executive roles, and also currently practicing as a lawyer, education has become a very important part of what I tend to do. I continue to see issues that arise, particularly in horticulture businesses, and I often wonder about why those things occur. I'll talk shortly about our business, the NSA business, and the fact that we have about 80% of our clients are in fact horticulture businesses. I've just said there that I'm also a principal of our law practice. And as I said, there's 80% of our clients are horticulture businesses. So I work very closely in the horticulture business. I'm certainly not a grower by any means, but I have a pretty good understanding of some of the issues that take place. The state of the nation with regards to agriculture and horticulture looks like this. Agriculture represents about 2% of Australia's GDP, represents about 2% of Australia's workforce, and accounts for approximately 27% of all workplace fatalities. So they're quite damning statistics. Horticulture, as we heard earlier today, is a high-risk sector identified by the Fair Work Ombudsman. In financial year 21, Australia produced 3.8 million tonnes of fresh vegetables with a farm gate value of $4 million. So they're big statistics. What that meant for me was that I needed to understand that. I needed to understand if I'm going to operate in that environment effectively, I needed to understand not just those statistics, but what the farm owners, what growers and what workers go through on a day-to-day basis. And again, thinking about my parents and their background and some of the issues that they had to experience, this is what led me to do some of this research. And I'm not sure whether or not this was an ideal approach, but what I have done, and it certainly wasn't a visionary approach, I have to say it was quite coincidental. What I had to do was I decided that for me to understand the issues that arise within horticulture businesses, I need to get in amongst it. What I didn't realise was how tough it actually was. A lot of our clients would ring me, for instance, at about 5 o'clock on a weekday and say, we've got a problem, we've got a number of people that are coming in tomorrow, they're new to our environment, they need a safety induction, so can you help us out with that? And again, adopting this muddy boots approach, I felt an obligation to do that. What that meant was being there at 5 o'clock in the morning, and the first thing I did was check the weather report, and usually to find out that it was quite wet, windy and wild. And I often thought to myself, whether these people are stitching me up or not. But that's exactly what needed to take place. So it's not unusual for me to be involved in day-to-day activities which involves those types of tasks, and then later in the morning to be giving sessions like I was fortunate enough to do yesterday with the Oz Group to their board about obligations and duties, and about informing them about upcoming laws and how to deal with these matters. So my role in this horticulture environment is quite wide. And I've got there, it sometimes does feel like a bad marriage, because often I'm asked to ring up and do things that I think to myself, oh geez, this is going to be a tough job, but you've just got to do these things. Nonetheless, it is symbolic of what happens in a day-to-day environment. I've been fortunate enough to have represented and assisted various horticulture businesses, both small and large, in a variety of different matters, both HR, employment law and safety matters. And what I have to say, despite the rigour and despite how tough it is, there is not one of our horticulture clients, we've got about 60 or 70 on our books, there is not one of them that intentionally seeks to underpay or to cause any issues, any injuries with any of their workers. Not one of them. But the issue that I find, the issue that I see, is that a lot of, certainly growers, business owners, managers, leaders in these environments, and when we think about it, it is those leaders, it is those supervisors that are dealing with the day-to-day task every day. They're the ones that have to feel that pinch, that pressure every day. The common theme that I always experience and hear about is the fact that they operate in environments because they don't know how to do things, because they say that what they have is information that sometimes is not contextualised for them. So they need information that is practical, that is insightful, that's going to give insight about how to deal with situations as they arise. We know the data suggests that 75% of the fatalities that take place in agriculture are as a result of single vehicle incidents. So I know when I'm out there in the fields, I know what that is like when there are tractors and when there are trailers and when there are forklifts. They're high risk type environments, and when those situations arise and there is interaction between people in those situations, there is a likely incident that may occur. What we need to do through educational services and resources and processes and systems is to be able to provide that guidance for them. As we touched on, as a result of that, what has come about is the fact that my perspective on horticulture, and again, this is just my perspective based on the clients that we have. Again, our clients vary in size, some from 10 operators through to 150 people in the business. So this is what they say to me, and this is how I understand it. That generally, we've heard some of these issues throughout several presentations today, but generally, horticulture involves large workforces because of the high degree of labour-intensive work, and we heard about that, the berry situation down the back. And that's again symbolic of what I see on a regular basis. Large numbers of workers who come from non-English speaking background, and that's a challenge. That's a challenge for those operators that have to turn up in the morning, that is the supervisors, managers and leaders, that have to deal with this situation, and they know they have to do safety inductions, yet they know they have to get this action happening really quickly. How are they going to deal with that? Is it going to be understood? Because from a legal perspective, it is not just about making sure boxes are ticked off, but it is about making sure that there is adequate competency that has been achieved. And that requires another skill. How do you convey that competency to those where English is not their second language? And again, these are things that we see on a regular basis. Obviously, we've heard today about the lower margins that exist in horticulture, and that causes pressure. So business owners, I speak regularly with Catherine about this, that business owners have to deal with a variety of different issues. The lower margins, labour, about produce, getting it out, getting it harvested, meeting timelines, meeting deadlines. There's a number of issues that need to be dealt with. One of the other comments that I get told about is that they're underrepresented in associations. So specifically with regards to horticulture, there is that fear amongst our clients. And again, we have clients through Victoria and throughout Australia, varying in size. That's their feeling. Obviously, a high seasonal workforce that exists. The challenge of keeping abreast with various federal and state legislation causes an overwhelming emotion to many hort businesses. And often, as Edmund has said, when business owners are dealing with so many different issues and they hear about all these laws that exist both from a state jurisdiction and also from a federal jurisdiction, there is this overwhelming feeling about how they're going to deal with it. It's one thing to hear about it, but it's another to have the skill, the expertise and the resources to put those systems into the business to ensure that compliance takes place. So what's happened again, I've mentioned Catherine a few times, but Catherine and I started a business called Veg Education. Catherine and I met when Catherine's business had a little issue, just a very little one, some years ago. And I assisted Catherine through that matter, and as a result of that, we got to know each other quite well and determined that we both had shared values with regards to a variety of different issues, Catherine from a horticulture perspective and mine from a legal. We felt as though there is an absolute need and desire and appetite for many people to have resources and to have training systems that are relevant and contextualised to businesses and specifically to industries. And that's how we came about with the development of Veg Education. We've been operating for a couple of years now. We've seen our business really start to move along. We're gaining a lot of traction. We have a lot of interest from federal and state organisations and government that want to engage with us, that want our assistance with these contextualised programs. So we're certainly at the start of what we think is going to be a fairly, hopefully quite exciting journey for many people. With this knowledge, as I've said, what we have seen is an improvement. We test what we do in our little industry. We test it through the farms, through our clients. We put systems in place, we put practices in place, we have videos, we have images now when we do safety inductions. So we keep words to a minimum, and we do that by making sure that our videos and all our pictures and all our images are contextualised to what is relevant to those particular organisations. We've seen success not only through what we do, but also there's data to support that. There's some wonderful information, as we said earlier by Steve, on the Fair Work Ombudsman website. There's some great resources that are available. And Fair Farms also, we certainly do quite a bit with Fair Farms with regards to training resources, and their resources are absolutely terrific. Our role, really, Catherine and I, again, through the development of Veg Education, we see we can play a critical role towards assisting and achieving many of the obstacles, barriers and hurdles that currently exist with regards to horticulture, and that is in relation to employment law and also safety law. And we see that by education being the key, the central focus, the key point of what we can do. So our aim is to link the law and to contextualise what happens in the horticulture businesses with what happens in horticulture environments. That's what we seek to achieve. Again, I just want to thank you. I know that there's a lot of themes that have been mentioned already throughout this session, but I would like to thank you all for the opportunity. My challenge today was twofold. One was to keep you interested and the other was to stay within 15 minutes. I hope I've achieved both. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Neil, for sharing your perspectives on horticulture, even the state of the nation, those links between our industry and the law, and an introduction to your growing veg education business. Our final speaker for the day is Joanne Wigg, an experienced APSCA auditor. It's being super safe over there, which is good to see. At the CSCA level, Jo has audited for many programs, including Fair Farms, across Australia, including food manufacture, horticulture, meat processing, transport, and packaging industries. She is currently working for Merriu Nutri-Sciences, based in Brisbane. I'd like you, for the last time, to give a very big Fair Farms welcome to the stage to Jo.
Wow, lucky last, hey? How's everyone going? That's why I've got the high vis on, you know, you can hardly miss it. As far as closing out for today, I was dobbed in by my boss to actually present on behalf of the auditors. Sachin said, great, so here I am. So at the moment, I'm working for a company called Merriu, and they're a global company, and the reason that that's significant is because Fair Farms is Australian, and SEDEX, which is one of the audit programs that I've worked on over the years, is global. So we've got both ends of it. Our company that I'm working for, they're in 27 countries, which is a lot. I've not been to any other ones apart from Australia. They've got 100 laboratories and over 8,000 employees. On the other side of that, I've worked for several Australian companies as well, and I've done audits for international companies such as Apple. I've been involved in construction, safety. I'm an old-fashioned whozo, for anyone who remembers that. But basically, what I'm here for today is to summarise everything that we've talked about all day. So let's make a crack at it, eh? So, what I'm here to do, I'm an auditor, I'm not a professional speaker, but I'd like to pull everything together and try and make it really simple for people to know about audits. So, is this what you expect? Who's a farmer out there, or who's had an audit? A few tables. Okay, what do you expect when someone walks in the door and it's audit day? Yeah, well, crikey, have I got everything ready? What's she going to ask? What are we going to do? Are these people well briefed? What are they going to say? So what I want to do today is I want to get rid of that. Okay? Forget what you thought the audit day was going to be about. We're just people. We make mistakes. The only difference is that we have the expertise in a certain area. Just like today, everyone who's spoken has had expertise in their area. So I'd like people to think about that at their next audit and use that as a tool. Some people might say auditors are tools, but we want everyone to get on board. And how we get on board depends about where you're coming from, what your bias is. We know what happened to the Titanic, okay? It sank. So the little boy at the top, he's quite confident that everything's fine. The guy down the bottom, he's not so sure. And what we see, it's based on what we know up to now, okay? So just ask yourselves, where's my angle coming from? Just a refresher on human rights, social compliance audits. In reality, in Australia, they're fairly new. ARDA's been involved since, 2011? But they've really become the flavour of the month in the last couple of years. So it's human rights, it's access, it's remedy, it's laws, all sorts of things. So I'm trying to make it simple for everyone. The first question, with law, is it written or is it just hearsay? Very, very important, is it understood? And if it is it understood by everybody? And then from the business point of view, is it working? Because if any of those three are a no, then we've got some work to do, right? Okay, and your question you need to ask yourself, well, what happens if I do something as opposed to what happens if I know I should do something but I actually don't do it? So, my goal is to convert confusion into confidence. So, some of the language, the lingo. Who can tell me what APSCA stands for, apart from ARTA? Okay. It's the Association of Professional Social Compliance Auditors. Okay? It's a process where you have to do exams. It's an international recognition, and it's not easy. I think in Australia there's somewhere between 25 and 35 of us. That's it. And so earlier in the day people have said, you know, it's hard to get auditors. That's why. As a SEDEX auditor, as an auditor for Sachin, we have to meet all those rules. They're not easy. So what they do is they approve auditors and they also approve the audit CVs, so the companies that are providing the auditors. So that's all based on the ILO. Who knows what the ILO is? Yes? Right. Who knows what the ETI is? Yep. Yeah. And we're learning about local law. We've had some really great talk today on local law. So all of that, when we do a social compliance audit, is important, but it doesn't just affect the farm on the day, it affects the whole supply chain. So, you know, it's the agencies. It could be your truck drivers, although they might not be officially part of that audit. We need to start in Australia thinking about supply chain. Now, on the left we see a bottle shop full of grog. Sounds pretty good at that. Have you got something coming for tonight? However, on the right-hand side is a little boy I saw in Uganda a few years ago making gin. Not even 10 years old. So in Australia we're regulated, we're fairly well versed in what the rules are, but just know that it happens elsewhere and we're really lucky to be in this country. So, to try and make it easy for everyone, I've developed, I was asked actually if this was a patent or if it was printed anywhere, but no, it's not. I just made it up. So the big C, some people might think it's cancer. I call it confusion. And I've got 6 steps that if we all follow them, it should really help, okay? So the first one is currency. So are we actually getting the right information from the right places, and is it current? Believe it or not, I know auditors who've done their exams and have studied the wrong version and failed because they didn't actually check that they've got the latest information. So that's really important. Here at COFT, they probably go surfing. If you don't know where the rips are, you're in trouble. So be current. Confirm the focus. Make sure you know what you're reading is right. For now, leave what's not relevant. If it's a critical issue and you've got 10 things to deal with the most important ones first. And then periodically check where you're going. You know, if you're halfway going out through the rip, don't worry about anyone else. Just have a quick side-to-side look and just go out until it's safe. and communicate with everyone else. And we're so lucky today to have so many people in the room with such expertise in their fields. We really need to use that, capitalise on it. So the clarity, you know, the old Titanic's in the fog, you know, they weren't to know that there was a big issue ahead. So seek the right information, get the right tools, confirm the focus, leave what's not relevant for now, and review your status. How do you review your status? You ask people that know, see how you compare with others, that sort of thing. Comprehension. So it's, as we said, it's not good enough just to be trained in something. You need to understand it, and there needs to be that competency at the end. So these steps along the way, if we follow all of them, we'll be confident at the end that we've done the best that we can do. We've done our due diligence. So do what's right because it's the right thing to do. Simple as that. Keep it simple. So, conformity. Would you believe, a few years ago, once again in Africa, I was teaching African kids how to dance. I can't dance to save myself. But it's when you bring a group of people together with the same mission and the same ideas, and they're open to listen and to learn, you can make a big difference. And that's what happened. They thought I was hilarious. But as you can see, all eyes were on me and it worked. So we need to communicate. We've got to be careful when we're talking about different things, when we're sharing information, we need to be accurate. So we need to communicate accurately with each other. And if we don't know something, be honest enough to say, hey, I don't know. I've audited people in this room. And if I don't know the answer, I will say, oh, look, I don't know, but I'll find out. And that goes for everything. It doesn't just go for being audited, it goes for the products that you produce, goes for the standards that we follow, it goes for facility rules, how you write your SOPs, all of those things. We just need to make sure we're confident that they're right and that they're relevant. So continuous improvement, it was a catch cry a few years ago. And it's still something that I think Ada was alluding to. You know, why do we do these audits? We do them to continually improve, to get better, to learn from each other. And it's much better if I highlight something than if the authorities come. Would you agree? So treat the auditors as your buddy. We can't consult, but what we can do is we can help you out. If you have a question, you're not sure about something, you can ask, and we can share best practice. There's no rules against that. There's engagement surveys, all those sort of things you can be involved with. If we do all these things and we work together, we use all the different teams and departments, where will your confidence go? Up. As I said, I'm not a guest speaker. I just like to share what I know with like-minded people that have an idea, that want to do the right thing, and that's what's important. Okay, so if you do that, you can sleep at night, you know you've done your best, you can communicate to your team about human rights, and you know you're on the right track. Now, just to sum up, a few things I've learnt as I've done all these different audits. A little bit about audit day. Audit day doesn't start on the day. You get your letter or email or whatever it might be, and you actually, that's your first opening session. You get a chance to say, okay, yes, it's definitely on this day. So start liaising with the auditor from there if the laws allow, if the rules allow, and you know, don't be afraid to ask. Say, yes, is there something I can do ahead to help? Can I clarify this? Those sort of things. Be honest on the day. If you don't know, don't try and hide anything. Just be honest and they will guide you through. It's your opportunity to tell your story. It's your farm, it's your property. It's your team of workers. Be proud. Tell them about what all the good things are that you're doing. You know, whether it's yourself or you've got some new innovation that you've done or you worked out for your team, don't be afraid to share it. As I said, if you're not sure, ask and plan for success. Don't plan for doom and gloom like we heard at the start. Because I know that's when I go into a farm or a facility, I've gone anywhere from 5 workers to 2,000. They all think, oh, crikey, here's the auditor, what's going to happen? Prepare in the early days to win, to show what you have done. And most important, use all the resources that you've got. The tools on the Fair Farms website are awesome. I've gone through and I've done not all of them, but quite a few of the modules, and they really teach you a lot. They're awesome. So as far as auditing social compliance goes, it's about the people, you know. Is there a system? Does everyone know about it? Is it working? So we have our opening meeting. It's usually with the senior person in the business, and it can be part of your team. Why not include the team? If you're proud of what you've done, invite them. It's an opportunity for them to learn, to understand what it's all about. The interviews have to be selected by the auditor. So that could be a bit scary. You don't know who we're going to ask. And we try to be representative of the whole workforce. That's why we ask who's going to be in what departments, what your work covers, that sort of thing. And it does include the agencies. So that's something that the CBs usually ask for ahead of time. They say, well, you know, are you using any agencies? If you are, who are they? And what percentage of your workforce is covered by agencies? And your management system review. You guys, it's your system, so you're the best ones to explain it. We look at your paperwork, we have a look and look at your policies and procedures, see if they're working, see if the workers know about it. That's usually what the interviews are for. Like, we all know that the interviews are really to see if the workers can back up what the management have told us. We're just collecting information, that's all we're doing. And then payroll and wages, that's a complicated one. And it's a sensitive one, but we have to dig down and we have to find out. And if we do that, we then have to make sure that we're very confidential with our findings. And so that's where things like disclosure statements and that sort of thing come into play. So we look at contracts or EBAs, if that's the case, or what sort of agreements are in place, whether they're written, whether they're verbal. We look at timesheets, pay slips. Sometimes if they're not there, we can say, well, how does the worker know how much they're getting? Sometimes it's electronic on their phone so they can show us. If that doesn't match up with what the manager's told us, we know something's not quite right, we can dig deeper. And that's basically what a social compliance audit is. It's those 4 things. And what we need to do is try and make those 4 elements, doing the right thing every day, as best we can and as best we know how with the information that we have, make it part of our everyday life for our business moving forward. And do things for yourselves, not for the auditors. That's the most important thing. If you can do all the things that are in the Fair Farms program or the SEDEX program, the business will automatically improve. Everything else will start to fall into place. You'll be feeling more confident, you'll be feeling more comfortable, and as I said, you can sleep at night. They're the main things. So in summary, be current, be in the now. Don't be reading last year's version of something. That's the first step. Use the Fair Farms tools as a guide. I know I do. I found this change to piece rates very confusing, and then I read the read the module on it, and I thought, oh, now it makes sense. You know, as of 28th of April, this is what we have to do. Take the proven path. If there's other people out there that have more expertise than you do, then please use their skills. You know, I'm not quite a 56-year-old male, but, and I've been around a little while, but, you know, if you can pick the brains of the auditors or the law enforcement or the berry growers or whatever it might be, do that. They won't mind. Don't be afraid to ask. And network like we are. I'd really like to thank Sachin and his team for organising such a great function today. It's the first one, and it's great to see so many people that are interested and so many people that really want to make a difference, and we are right at the start. Social compliance, in reality, is developing through its maturity. I think we're still teenagers. You know, it's been around since 2011 and earlier. However, it's really only becoming flavour of the month. It's like the old exponential curve, you know. I think we're about here. And then once it kicks off, I mean, I've been doing these for 4 years. I started one of the very first Fair Farms trial runs that we did. We did some audits down in Tasmania and some around this area, actually. And I've seen the changes over the years, and it's the right thing to do. Thank you.
This is starting to feel and look a little bit exactly like Woodstock in '69 by the sounds of what Joanna's saying. So I'm just going to ask the other speakers from that session to pop up. We only have time for just a couple of very quick questions because we're a bit short on time, but I do happen to know there are a couple of questions in the room for these guys. Or at least I thought there were some questions in the room. A hand up if you've got a question. We'll find a microphone.
So I think either of Edmund or Neil could answer this one. If there's, so if we meet with the group of employees in the morning and give them their work instructions for the whole day and send them off, and then on their lunch break, they go and drink alcohol or use drugs, and there is an incident either in the workplace or on the way home from the workplace because of this, which parties are liable in those situations?
Well, the principle is you're supposed to provide safe, consistent work. So the idea would be that they shouldn't be able to drink at work, and the fact that they are able to do it places some responsibility on the PCBU. So if you as an employer see that as a hazard, something that could be happening, really you should be putting in place measures to make sure that it doesn't, whether that's a zero tolerance alcohol policy or, with random breath tests, those types of measures. If it were a one-off and something happened, that's going to be important in mitigation. But if it were something that happened regularly and nobody had been injured, and then all of a sudden somebody is injured, there would be the possibility, absolutely, of a prosecution. Yeah.
Thanks for your question. Again, back to how the audit's done and how it needs to manage in terms of how you put the system in place. The first important part, we always recommend having the proper policy procedure in place. So you need to have a drug and alcohol policy in place. The next part, which is Joe mentions effectiveness, that if it works, you need to communicate and training and to make sure that employees are aware of your policy procedure. However, to add to this note, remember that there is a disciplinary policy procedures that is very important for any business to make sure that they have this policy procedure in place and it's communicated to the employees that if these things happen or any incident, then it's back responsibility to the workers. So basically, this is a kind of, a responsibility of business owners and also workers as well. But it needs to be clear in terms of how you communicate and making sure everyone understands that you have this policy in place, and also you have a disciplinary in case if anything happens, right?
And excuse me, just to extend on a couple of points also, the reasonably practicable statement that is common across all jurisdictions is absolutely critical. So it is to ensure that you have, as a PCBU or an owner of a business or anyone that occupies a role of influence, that you have done everything you reasonably and practicably could have done to avoid that issue from occurring. That's what's critical. Does that help? Question here.
This is just a question for Neil. I was interested by your comment that the horticulture growers that you work with say that they don't feel that they're represented in associations. Can you expand on that a little bit, please?
Sure. So again, as I said, we've got about 60 odd of our clients, and they're horticulture businesses. And what they say is that whilst there are tools and resources that are available, they have the view that a lot of those resources and tools are quite generic. So what they're seeking is contextualised and practical solutions to some of the issues that arise. So how do they deal with some of the day-to-day type issues? Do the resources that are available to them, and there are plenty of resources, does that in fact cover off what they're after? Their response to that is many times it doesn't. I'll let them know.
Okay, I think that might be us. I just want to take an opportunity to thank the speakers in this last session. I think it's been a fantastic session and a good one to round us out on. As you're not going to miss out, you've seen all these beautiful boxes come up. So we do have some gifts as well. Thank you so much. And as we hand those out, could you just join me in giving these guys a round of applause? Feel free to keep your seat. We are about to wrap up. No, just take your seat, it's fine. So that concludes our conference for the day. I think you can all agree it's been an outstanding day in terms of the content. There's been a lot to get across. If we'd taken Steve Bradbury's advice, we'd been taking notes. Otherwise, in 2 weeks' time, we'll have forgotten 80%. But there is an amount of collateral, I know, in our bags. And of course, a lot of these speakers today are contactable. If you just reach out, you can follow up on conversations that have started today. Please exchange details with each other. I feel like there's something happening here. Can I just do the dinner thing tonight and then we can do that? For those of us joining dinner, for us at the gala dinner and awards night, please be at the Osprey Room by 6:30 p.m. And that is the last official thing I have to say in terms of the conference. Thank you.
So for those of you who don't know Richard, Richard has worked with GrowCom for a number of years and has recently left us to go to National Farmers Federation, which we were very upset about, but good on NFF for poaching him. And we asked him to MC today and he was very excited to do so, and I think he's done a sterling job. So I just give a round of applause for Richard today too. And that truly ends it. Thank you everyone, see you at dinner.